it's me, Theodora Elishay, and this is Crash Course 2.0. The first episode of our show will discuss the agricultural revolution, focusing on its impact and occurrence in sub-Saharan Africa. Let's dive in. First and foremost, the agricultural revolution, also called the Neolithic Revolution, a term coined by V. Gordon Childe, occurred from 10,000 BCE to 8,000 BC and was a period of drastic change for all of humanity. Although it occurred over a long period of time, contrary to what the word revolution might suggest, it truly revolutionized human life, bringing about a new era and several unprecedented changes. Agriculture was first discovered by pastoral nomads when they returned to locations only to find that the seeds that they had spilled had germinated. These pastoralists then harnessed the power that they had discovered and began to grow their own foods in larger and larger amounts, resulting in agricultural surpluses that had big impacts on the societies in which they were produced. These agricultural societies, however, often negatively impacted the land around them. Agricultural practices contributed to erosion and other detrimental processes. Humanity was shaping the environment around it in a way it never had before through the formation of irrigation systems, domestication of animals, and clearing of forested land for agricultural purposes. And sadly, the environment was getting the short end of the stick. Agriculture did bring stability and provide order to societies due to the consistent food supply that it afforded, which positively impacted people. It also had several unintended consequences, often called the Neolithic package, that led to the formation of even more complex societies. These consequences include the formation of complex religious traditions, drastic increases in population, technological innovations, specialization, social stratification, and the emergence of patriarchy. As more and more agricultural surpluses were produced, the need for all members of a community to focus on farming decreased, and people were free to take up other occupations. This led to increased specialization of jobs, which led to several important technological innovations. Pottery, plows, metallurgy, textiles, and the wheel were all invented during this time, showcasing the booming economies and innovations specific to this period. The invention of the wheel impacted many different aspects of human life, allowing for advanced warfare, increased agricultural production, more refined textile and pottery work, and better transportation. Plows also contributed to agricultural output, which led to even more specialization. Copper and eventually bronze metallurgy allowed for the creation of finer tools and weapons, in addition to allowing artisans to decorate their works with alluring designs. Trade also increased during this era due to both specialization of jobs and of whole communities who had to trade with one another in order to acquire goods that they were not able to produce on their own. Populations increased quickly due to the availability of food and the fact that people had begun to settle down in one small area, making childbearing easier and more beneficial than it was in hunting and gathering societies. Because of people's dependence on nature, communities often personified aspects of nature, making them gods or other deities, and creating elaborate myths in order to explain the occurrence of a particular thing in nature. Some societies even worshipped fertility deities. There were often religious rituals associated with these beliefs, usually based on pleasing the gods so that they might keep the village safe or bring rains that would increase agricultural output. In addition to these relatively beneficial unintended consequences, there are several more negative consequences that the agricultural revolution brought about. High populations of people concentrated in a small area, as well as the trade that occurred between these people, led to increased rates of epidemic among villages. In addition, people living in agricultural societies were often less healthy than their hunting and gathering counterparts, who had more varied diets and were more physically fit. The introduction of agriculture also led to the emergence of social stratification and patriarchy. Because people were now setting up permanent settlements on pieces of land, then became a status of wealth. Individual families were able to accumulate land, which was wealth and passed it down through their generations, becoming the nobility in whatever societies that they were part of. There were, of course, some poor people and families present in these communities as well. Patriarchy emerged in agricultural societies, whereas in the previous pastoral or hunting and gathering societies, work was evenly divided amongst males and females, leading to relatively equal relations between the two sexes. These detrimental impacts of the introduction of large-scale agriculture into human life are part of the reason Jared Diamond, an esteemed anthropologist, claims that the Neolithic Revolution was humanity's greatest mistake. Focusing on the Neolithic Revolution's impact on sub-Saharan Africa specifically, one can see how these broad topics apply to this particular area of the world. The people of sub-Saharan Africa previously practiced pastoralism and eventually independently discovered agriculture. They began domesticating animals such as donkeys, cats, sheep, and goats, which were introduced to the area from Southwest Asia, and cattle, which were domesticated in the region of Sudan. Sub-Saharan individuals cultivated wheat, specifically in Ethiopia, as well as taro, bananas, and plantains. There were 3 specific regions in which large-scale agriculture took place, and each region grew its own special crops. In the Ethiopian highlands, coffee, finger millet, cod, and sete, noog, and teff were grown. Sorghum, pearl millet, gourds, watermelons, and cotton were produced in the Sahel, the transition area between the Sahara and the Savannah, mainly in Sudan. In West Africa, the kola nut, African rice, yams, and oil palm were produced. It is thought that agriculture was first developed in Sudan and eventually migrated to other regions of Africa. Metallurgy also developed in the area during the Neolithic Age. Egyptians introduced copper implements to Sudan through cultural diffusion, while much of the rest of sub-Saharan Africa was entering the Ice Age, putting it ahead of its fellow countries in terms of innovation. Polished celts, Stone Age tools made of metal or stone, were created in Khartoum, the capital of Sudan, which also showcased the wide impacts that the agricultural revolution had on Sudan in particular. And that will conclude the first episode of Crash Course 2.0. Bye, and thanks for watching.